Now, in this video, I'm going to show you the best way to go from steep in the downswing, this vertical shaft, to shallow in the downswing, where the shaft lays down and that helps you turn through the golf shot. Now, it's really a question I get all the time from steep golfers is, how do I do that? How do I go from steep to shallow? And what I found is the best way with working with my students on Skillist to get them in a really fast rate going from steep to shallow is target the reason why you steepen the shaft and do the opposite of it. So this is where quite a lot of people, I'd say, would suffer from this steepening the shaft reason, where their root cause to steepen the shaft would be their trail elbow. So where it's pointing starts to go behind them in the downswing. See how the elbow is pointing down and now it's pointing behind me. You can see how that will steepen the shaft, right arm movement. To where if a golfer wants to get more shallow from there, there'll be no point for them, for example, to bow the left wrist, because we know bowing the left wrist will also shallow the shaft. But that won't get them shallow because that trail arm is already pointing behind them. It steepens the shaft. So what we've got to do with that type of golfer will be make that steepener, which is that right arm being behind, improve that. Get that right arm back in front of you. You've fixed your steep shaft, fixed the reason why, and doing that movement more has shallowed out that club shaft for you. To where someone, if they cup that left wrist, got a left wrist cup, that's gonna, and maintain that in the downswing, that's gonna cause the shaft to stay steep. Like we just said before, bowing the left wrist, going into some bow, will start to shallow the golf club for you. So it's very specific to your specific problem you suffer with in the golf swing. If you're steep for this reason, then you need to shallow it by the same reason, just the opposite way. So ultimately, let's talk about a drill you could do, for example, for this right arm staying behind. So when this right elbow points behind, like we said, that's going to steepen the shaft. Things that happen from steep shaft, if you continue to rotate, you're going to cut massively across it, massive steep angle of attack. Most of you would early extend to get the club back pitching behind you again. So get this more in front. We want to ultimately close the gap between the right arm and the body. The more connection it has, we close that gap from the front on. If it stays behind, we continue to have a gap here. So let's get a glove, for example. So just grab a spare glove, put it underneath your trail arm, keep it there the entire time. So we can see if I'm keeping this right arm attached to my side and I'm keeping it underneath my arm, there's no way for this elbow to start going behind, because that glove has just fallen. So if I'm a golfer who is steepening the shaft because of their trail elbow points behind them, this is the way to get it shallowing. This is why you can go from steep to shallow quite fast. So keep this underneath my arm for the entirety of the downswing, elbows pointing down. Now I can continue to turn. So let's do that. Boom. Really nice. And of course, if I want to let it go, you're going to see the shaft get steep, and that feels very uncomfortable for me, being someone who naturally shallows it. So instant feedback via something like this, to where that's where absolutely, oh actually no, if I had that glove back on again, if you were someone who, let's say, cupped the left wrist, to fix that you would do a little drill to fix that. Now this is a very old glove, to where you're going to see my thumb pokes out for it, but I don't wear gloves, so this is from a while ago. Use this for my lessons. So grab a tee if you struggle with cupping left wrist, which steepens the shaft for you, if that is your problem. Now, you've got a tee in the glove just like this. If you start to cup left wrist, that tee's going to jab into you. So you want to create some space between the tee and the forearm there. That's bowing the left wrist. That's turned your steep shaft into a shallow shaft. Now, of course, if this is your problem, cupping left wrist, make sure you've got a, let's say, standard or weak grip, to make sure that bowing the left wrist doesn't close off the club face too much. I'll put a video at the end of this talking about that more in depth. But again, the reason why you're steepening it, just do the opposite and really focus hard on that area. Do a lot of practice with it, and then you're going to turn that steep shaft to a shallow shaft. Guys, as basic as that sounds, as this video really is, this is really important information, I think, because with golf it's very, very difficult. A lot of emotions are always wrapped up in our golf performance, to where it's quite hard for us to see these things, to where ultimately for us to get a problem and make that problem better, we have to ultimately do the opposite of it. And that's really where steepen the shaft, do the opposite to the reason why you steepen the shaft, and you'll get shallow. As basic as that sounds, it is very, very, very important information that I think if a lot of you apply that to your swing, it gets you more in the mindset of figuring out why something happens, and then gets you into the root cause and effect type of mindset, which is important to have. So if you steepen the shaft, figure out why, then you'll be able to fix it quite easily. If you want help to figure out why, there's some info down there in the description about my skill list. That's how to have online lessons with me. So it's just us having a lesson. We can certainly do that and get rid of this ugly steep shaft in your golf swing. So if you enjoyed this video, of course, click that like button. If you want more golf instructions just like this, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button too to be notified every time I put out a video. So fix the reason why you're steep and you'll be shallow as a result.